Hello, and thank you for downloading another episode of Your Life Simplified. My name is Brian Leitner, and I'll be the host today. Today's topic is about senior care and specifically senior living. And it's on the minds of a lot of us today. Whether it's for ourselves, a spouse, a parent, a loved one, or a friend, there's a great deal of information that's out there, and it's important that we have the right information. The good news is there are a lot of choices out there as it relates to senior care. Whether it's independent living, assisted living, or skilled nursing care, memory care, as well as simply living on your own, there are a lot of different options to choose from. Having said that, it can be rather confusing to a lot of people because of all these options. So today, I'm excited to have Sally Abrahms join us on the podcast today. Sally is a national recognized writer, a consultant on baby boomers and seniors. She's been published in the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, Newsweek Magazine, the New York Times, the AARP, Forbes, Kiplinger's, as well as the Washington Post. She's also authored 2 books and has been a contributor to 4 books. In addition to all that, Sally has spent 14 years of her life taking care of her parents. So from a personal perspective, she truly understands this space. Sally, thank you very much for being on the show today.
I'm delighted to be here, Brian.
So Sally, there's a lot taking place in this space today. There are a lot of different options. There's a variety of costs associated with this care. What are you seeing in this area today?
I'm seeing that even though there are these other options of independent, assisted, and skilled nursing, that most people want to age at home. And every study, including an AARP study, showed that 90% of people surveyed want to age in place at home or in the community. So these options of independent, assisted, and nursing care are fantastic, but it really is only 4.2% of people who end up in nursing homes. And I think what's important to understand is that most people are cared for by family members or friends. That said, there are all kinds of options. People can't really anticipate what's going to happen. It's really important to know all of these options and all of this information and where the resources are so that you don't have to scramble in an emergency and get subpar care. Again, baby boomers are on the cusp of, they may be thinking about care for their parents, but guess what? Baby boomers this year are 55 to 73 years old, and some of them are going to need care quite soon. And what I'm seeing is women who have married older men are now finding that there are 2 very different stages, especially when it comes to care. So it's important to pay attention because it's not just about mom and dad. It's about you or it's about your spouse. And besides these traditional places that we've talked about, the independent, assisted, and skilled nursing, and what I wanted to say about that is there are lots of places now that incorporate all 3.
Thanks, Sally. That was really interesting. You know, they call the baby boom generation the sandwich generation, just for the reasons you stated. What's also interesting is that the majority of people being taken care of by folks that, 1, may not have the skill set, and 2, may not have the desire to take care of these individuals. And as such, these individuals can candidly become a burden to the families of their loved ones. So let's talk a little bit about what the options are for individuals that are planning for this type of event or this type of situation.
Let me also tell you that 1/3 of all people over the age of 50 are either widowed, divorced, or never married. Some have children, but the children are either far away or unavailable for other reasons. So you can't really today be counting on your kids or your spouse to take care of you. And that's why people are coming up with all sorts of creative communities.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So what are some of the options that are out there?
Have you heard of co-housing?
I have, and I believe that's the thought of everything being decided by consensus. It's interesting, right? Have you ever been in a condo or something of that nature? Sort of everything that goes along with that, right?
They are building there used to be a lot of affordable co-housing, and they're either for seniors or they're intergenerational, but now they're making creating very high end. And another interesting thing about it is people who are in co-housing, unless they move in later after it's already built, create their own community. So in their common space, common house is what they call it, they might have a movie area, or they might have a dance studio, or music room. It really depends on the interests of the community. But the really important thing about this is that even though it's not formal care, people become like family and help take care of one another.
So I have a relative in an assisted living facility, and they have a movie theater there. They eat their meals together there. How is that different? In assisted living, is there more than just medical care versus what you're referring to?
Yeah, this is just a group of people who get together with a developer who create a community. Assisted living is more formal. It's when you need more care than living on your own. So it's a completely different kind of model. I should also say that when we're talking about independent, assisted, and skilled nursing, oftentimes they're all under the same roof or on the same campus. So it's just different levels of care if you need it. The co-housing community is just a group of people who get together and get to know one another, and then oftentimes become like family and interact informally with the people around whom they live.
So that's interesting when you're referring to this campus lifestyle where everything is under one roof. So those continuing care retirement communities, they're referred to as CCRCs because effectively, once you go onto that campus, you can be there for the rest of your life. And as you develop different needs and those types of facilities, they can continue to accommodate you. Is that right?
That's right. And so you never have to worry about moving someplace else, because there are assisted livings that don't have skilled nursing, and then you might have to move or bring care in. I want to say something about CCRCs because there's one model that's I think is particularly fascinating, and that is lifelong living communities. These are CCRCs that are either on college campuses or near college campuses. The residents of the CCRC either take classes from other people in the CCRC, or they can take classes at the university, but they can go to the cultural events at the university and the sports events. And there's a lot more intergenerational action than just going to a traditional CCRC where all the people are older.
That's such a great idea. They continue to educate themselves, obviously just simply keep themselves busy, but perhaps even more importantly, they have that socialization component that we all know is so critically important as we get older. It's just a great idea.
And some of them are ultra high end. There's a LGBT one in Sonoma Valley, California, that has these world renowned chefs. Some CCRCs also have wine cellars or winemaking or whatever. This is a group of oftentimes a place like at Dartmouth College, right nearby. They have professors who are retired from Dartmouth and other schools who are there, and they teach classes. They sometimes travel, go on trips together, and study about it before. So it's a variation on your traditional CCRC.
So all this care, especially with what you're talking about on the high end side, it's fascinating that this as an industry is constantly evolving just based upon the needs of general society, as we age, what we're interested in and so forth. So let's talk about the costs themselves, maybe starting with home care. As you indicated, a lot of folks want to stay within their own homes. So what might that look like?
Today, home care or health aid is around $22 an hour. Some people also have their families doing adult daycare, so they're out during the day with sometimes dementia, sometimes not dementia, but it's $72 a day on national average. That means it could be really anything depending on where you live. CCRCs tend to be super expensive. There's an entrance fee usually that's 100,000 to a million, and then you've got your monthly fees of 3,500 to 4,500 a month.
So that could get really expensive really fast.
Exactly. There's also something that they have in a few places across the country, and that is adult daycare for people with Alzheimer's, but it's actually in the middle of the night. And they do everything that they do during the day at night. And it allows caregivers at home to sleep, and they can get medical care, they can do cultural activities. And so I think you're going to see a lot more of that because Alzheimer's is just exploding.
So to be clear, these individuals are doing these activities at night because that's when they're awake, when their family members are home, obviously sleeping so they can get ready for the next day.
Right. It's a model that's in a very few places that you are going to see a lot more of. And it's just a brilliant concept. And they might get bathed in the middle of the night at their adult night care, but it's also a very stimulating kind of environment. And literally, the program is the same as it would be going to a day program. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that, especially as boomers get older. And if I were to give you the statistics of the number of people with Alzheimer's, it's quite scary. There are 5.7 million people with Alzheimer's today in the US, and that is supposed to double in the next 30 years.
Wow, those numbers are staggering.
So you're going to see a lot of people, and there are going to be a lot of programs and a lot of care around that. I also wanted to say, when I told you about the prices of the home care, the aids, there's this new model that a couple of companies have come out with, and it's sort of like an online matchmaking for caregivers, professional caregivers and families, and it eliminates the agency fee, which could be double. So maybe it's $15 an hour. But I think you're going to see a lot more rather than 21, 25. So I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of this. And these companies vet the professional caregivers, and they often do their taxes and give them coaching and support so that the caregivers aren't isolated. And everybody seems to talk about social isolation and loneliness for the person who's receiving the care, but they don't often talk about it for the person giving the care.
Yeah, so that's interesting for a whole host of reasons. But what are the other options that are outside of co-housing?
There are all kinds of, remember I said there were niche communities where people who have similar interests get together? Well, they have arts colonies like that in California. So these are older people who live in their kind of apartment because they're rentals, and they might be retired actors or would-be actors or playwrights or uh, musicians, and they take classes, or artists, and they're all older and they're all growing old together. And then one model I didn't mention, there are all these places, especially in New York, where people have moved into the apartments when they were young and they've just stayed there and grown older. And so they stay where they are, but they need services. So social service agencies bring in the care to the people in the building. That's called an a naturally occurring retirement community, or NORC. I don't know if you've heard of that.
I haven't.
But you're going to see that too. You're going to see all kinds of models that haven't even been invented yet. There's now this niche community that Jimmy Buffett is rolling out in 3 communities in Florida and South Carolina. And it's called, guess what? Margaritaville.
Of course it is.
And it's like a 55 plus active community. And I don't know if I can say this on the air, but in Florida, there is also a nude community. And last time I looked, no pun intended, they were talking about building an assisted living.
That's terrific. It's something for everybody, right? It takes all kinds.
Exactly.
Thanks again for downloading this episode of Your Life Simplified, which is produced by Mariner Wealth Advisors. And at Mariner Wealth Advisors, we're here to serve as your advocate. We help people chart a course to reach their personal and financial goals so that they can have greater peace of mind that may lead to a more fulfilling life. We do this by always putting our clients first. Because as fiduciaries, we're required to provide guidance that's in the best interest of clients, not in the best interest of a company or shareholders or anyone else. So as you listen to this podcast and have questions about maybe your own financial situation, or would simply like a second opinion, or even you have an idea for a future podcast, please go ahead and email us at podcast@marinerwealthadvisors.com. If you found the information on this podcast valuable, please go ahead and share it with a friend or family member that you think might benefit from this information. And please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and now back to the episode. So those are all great options depending upon, what the individual's looking for. And it's interesting, again, as these models continue to evolve, there'll be even more options. So going back to some of the more traditional ones, whether that be assisted living or nursing homes or dementia or memory care, what are some of the costs associated with these other options?
A national average, $45,000 a year. And it can go up to $6,000 a month. Skilled nursing is usually $84,000 to $100,000 plus. So for a semi-private room, it's about $245 a day. For a private room, it's $275 a day. Dementia or memory care can be $1,000 more a month. But my friend's mother is in memory care in upstate New York, so it's not a metropolitan area, and they pay $14,000 a month.
So again, very costly.
Yes.
And to your point, for those of us that are listening that are not familiar with the area, $14,000 a month in upstate New York is a whole lot cheaper than the metro New York City area. So while you expect those costs to be high in New York City, you wouldn't think it would be that high in some of the rural communities in upstate New York.
Sometimes there's a mix. So my mother was in independent living in a CCRC, but she had a stroke. So they said, you're not a candidate for assisted living, and she didn't want to go to the skilled nursing on the campus. So they said the only way you can stay in your independent unit is if you get 24-hour care. So for 7.5 years, my mother paid for her monthly independent living fee, which was probably at least $3,500 a month, plus 24-hour care. So sometimes it's a combination of these arrangements, but it is very, very pricey.
You're absolutely right. It could be a fortune. And what that does to your overall financial situation if you're not prepared for that. So, people, they talk about Medicare and what it pays for, but Medicare does not cover this, right?
Medicare pays 100% of costs of care in a nursing home for 20 days and 80% of costs up to 80 more days. But they won't pay for senior living, and they won't pay for help with bathing, dressing, eating. And often they don't pay for assisted living unless it's medical care, and they don't pay for adult daycare. So they pay for medical care. Even with Alzheimer's, they don't pay for personal care.
Wow. So there's no getting around it. All these options can be very expensive, and people are always asking the best ways to pay for this. And frankly, like many expenses, the best thing to do is to have a plan. That might consist of trying to determine what you'll need, the type of care, the costs associated with that. The reality is that there are a lot of folks out there that will simply not be able to afford this. Others will, and they'll do so through financing it through long-term care insurance, or potentially they'll even self-fund, right? They'll create their own investment account, if you will, and they'll save aggressively towards that as a goal so that they have the resources to pay for some of these expenses. And as it relates to long-term care insurance, the landscape has changed dramatically over the past 15 years. So whether long-term care insurance is the route to go or self-funding is the route to go, it's really a personal decision. And someone's going to want to walk through with their wealth advisor what situation or what opportunity is going to be best for them, because there are a lot of different factors that come into play.
And it's also, Brian, the policies are all different. So some policies offer more a day or less. And long-term care insurance can cover home care. It can cover assisted living. Medicare doesn't, but it can. Adult daycare, nursing, respite care, dementia and hospice, and also some home modification.
That's an excellent point. The way these policies are changing and evolving, it's important to understand what is out there as people begin to plan for this type of expense. And so now that we know the facilities that are out there, the options that are out there, how do you know what's a good choice for your loved one and maybe even for yourself? Like, how do people make those decisions, and where do they even get started?
I would hire a geriatric care manager because they will coordinate your care. This is a professional who makes recommendations for what you or your parent needs in the community, knows the community resources, and for an additional fee, can oversee other needs. They also know the good home care agencies, if you stay at home, senior center offerings in the community, and they are, in my mind, invaluable. And do you want to know how much they cost?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. What do they cost?
Okay. It's usually $50 to $200. And there may be a monthly retainer. That would be an hour. But if you wanted to find one, there's a National Association of Geriatric Care Managers. You could just Google it. They now, just to complicate things, they've changed their name to Aging Life Care Professionals. But if you Google geriatric care managers, you'll get that. I also think that word of mouth is gold, because if you ask your friend about their parents' facility or what their parents have done or who their parents have used, I also think that that's great. And I just wouldn't count on word of mouth. I would go there and vet it. But also, there are great resources, your local or state area agency on aging. If you go to the National Elder Care Locator website, they have a telephone number. They'll give you resources in your community. AARP has a good website. And there's also something that the government does, which is called, they have two. One is called Home Health Compare, and one is called Nursing Home Compare. And they will tell you what these facilities offer. These are Medicare facilities that take Medicare. So there really are a lot of resources besides a geriatric care manager, besides word of mouth. You just have to do it. You really have to do your research and not wait until the last second.
Sally, thank you. Those resources will obviously be very beneficial to listeners that are interested in this. And I guess my next question is, when do you know it's the right time for a facility or to take that next step?
I think it's a few things. It's when the home is no longer safe, because a lot of people end up falling at home. And or the houses, especially in New England, the houses often have steep steps and narrow doorways, and they're very vertical. And if you can modify your house, or if you have a first floor den that you can convert into a bedroom and you have a full bath, it may be okay, but they're possible that you can't do that. And let me just give you another tip that the National Home Builders Association has this new designation called Certified Aging in Place Specialists. And these are folks who will come out to your house and tell you how to modify your house, what you need, how much it will cost. And I'm sure they have recommendations. Some of them are architects, some of them are social workers, some of them are builders themselves, so they know. But that's one thing if your house is no longer safe, or you can't take care of yourself, or you go visit your parent and there's unopened mail or overdue bills or no food or rotten food. I think also loneliness and social isolation. What does it look like for you as an older person in this community? Because you could have the most beautiful house in the country with no steps and wide doorways and a bedroom on the first floor, all set up, great technology, so you don't even have to get up, a smart house. But if there's nobody around, or you can't get the services you need, or you can't go to a restaurant or a movie, or you're going to stop driving eventually, what are you going to do? Is there transportation around? Are there buses? Are there trains? Is there ride sharing? Same with medical services and cognitive impairment. Some people just can't stay alone. It's not safe, or they have a condition, a chronic condition that's getting worse, and they need more attention than they could get at home. So those are really the most important reasons that people leave, or they want to be near family or friends, and or they want to downsize and decide they'll try something else. So I think there are lots of reasons that people end up leaving their houses. But I would say the number one reason is that the house is not practical for them anymore.
So, Sally, those are all great things to look for. One of the things I've been reading about recently, as you mentioned, in transportation. And today you have, the Ubers of the world, the Lyfts of the world, and what they're doing to make people's lives easier and much more mobile, even if they're not able to drive. So whether that be for doctor's appointments or other reasons that, one might leave the house. Maybe something else that's just as interesting is the interesting question that some might ask of their loved ones, whether it's essentially, who's going to change that light bulb in their house when that goes out. And look, it could be a light bulb or it could be a handful of other things that, they're not going to be able to do anymore. So how are they going to get that done? Are they going to leverage someone that lives close by, or do they have an arrangement worked out with somebody? I mean, those are excellent things to think about. And I also know having conversations like this with loved ones is never easy. And so as advisors, we often help families with these conversations, with the individuals that they're going through this process, but obviously their family members as well. So it's a major step in somebody's life when they're trying to think through, their next phase. So, as you may no longer be able to do these things and be as independent as you once were. So there's a great deal of sensitivity as it relates to the topic that we're having and those conversations that go along with it.
Absolutely. And those conversations are uncomfortable, but they are critical.
Like most important decisions in life, right?
Yes.
So at this point, what do you think the most important thing for our listeners to know about this subject?
They need to not be relaxed about thinking about the future. They need to think, either if it's a parent or a spouse or themselves, what might it look like in the next 2 to 5 years? Do I want to live where I am? Do I have a support system here? If I think that someone might need care, where can I go? So to know the resources to know that there are excellent options out there. And also that you're not going to know exactly what's going to happen. And as you know, circumstances change instantly. But if you have no idea where to go or how to fund it or what to do, then you're going to not have the kinds of chances and opportunities and options that you would have. So I would say do your research or know where that research is, and you will feel a lot more comfortable and there'll be far fewer surprises.
To complement that, two of my takeaways from the show were regardless on how old you are, you may be in your late 30s, 40s, or 50s. This should be and needs to be on your radar, believe it or not. I mean, starting to think about this today is critical, depending upon your age and your overall situation. So, maybe start thinking about the long term and how ultimately you'd like this chapter of your life to look and how to ultimately prepare for that. And on the other side is really beyond the financial side, and it's truly taking care of your health today. I mean, what decisions are you making today that can improve your health for tomorrow? So over that long term, you may not need as much help in the future if you're in good health, you're in good shape, and you're being mindful of those things today, staying mobile and maintaining your balance and those types of things.
I think that's a great point, Brian. But I would also say that to have a support system, and if you don't, to plan for one so that you're not isolated and you're not as lonely, and that you make a very rich life for yourself.
Sally, thank you for your time, your expertise, and the resources you've given us today. I know our listeners will greatly appreciate this.
It's a pleasure, Brian.
So, Sally, before I let you go, we ask all of our guests the exact same question. And that question is, what is the worst financial decision you've ever made?
That's an easy one, because when I was in my early 30s, my husband and I decided on a whim to buy a second house, and 2.5 hours away in the Berkshires of Massachusetts. And we looked at it the first day. We weren't even house hunting. We saw this house the first day it went on the market. We bought it, and we realized that it was a money pit and had all sorts of problems with it. And my kids learned to ski there. They learned to go to outdoor concerts, classical concerts at Tanglewood. We hiked. So it wasn't all bad, but they were very, very little kids. And they got older, and then they got into sports at their primary residence. And then the market tanked, and we couldn't sell it. So for 10 years, we had the house, and for 2 or 3, it was fabulous. And then it was a financial mess. And the whole thing was a disaster. It was a very impulsive move. Don't do that.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry it was a money pit. I'm sorry it wasn't a great financial decision, but at least you had a couple of good years there, if there's ever any silver lining and joy you had for you and your family. So thank you for sharing that. Thanks again for joining the show. And as this industry evolves and the changes are made, we'll have to have you back as a guest at another time. So thank you.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Well, that wraps up another episode of Your Life Simplified. Thank you for listening, and I hope this information was helpful for either you or someone you might know. As always, if you have questions about the show or you'd like to hear a certain topic, you go ahead and email us at podcast@marinerwealthadvisors.com.
Mariner LLC, doing business as Mariner Wealth Advisors, or MWA, is an SEC registered investment advisor. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. MWA is in compliance with the current notice filing requirements imposed upon registered investment advisors by those states in which MWA maintains clients. MWA may only transact business in those states in which a notice has been filed or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from notice filing requirements. Any subsequent direct communication by MWA with a prospective client shall be conducted by a representative that is either registered or qualifies for an exemption or exclusion from registration in the state where the prospective client resides. websites. For additional information about MWA, including fees and services, please contact MWA or refer to the Investment Advisor Public Disclosure website at www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.